Reflection, Chapter 2. No! Mulan screamed. Shanyu laughed again and jumped off his horse, blade in his hand. He stabbed it into the snow, wiping it clean of Shang's blood. Then he advanced toward Mulan, cleaving the air with such strong strokes that the wind whipped Mulan's cheeks. Shanyu was a mere step away. She was next. Don't panic, don't panic. Mulan drew her sword just in time to block Shanyu's blade before it sliced her chest. He was strong, far stronger than she was. He overpowered her easily, and Mulan knew she couldn't hold him off for long, but she hoped she wouldn't have to. Shanyu's back was to the buckling avalanche of snow, and was rapidly flowing toward them. Mulan gathered all her strength and resolve. Then, the moment she saw an opening, she lowered her sword and swept her leg at Shanyu's ankle. It surprised the Hun, and he stumbled back, thrashing to regain his balance in the snow. That second was all she needed. Mulan whirled away and grabbed Shang by the arm to help him up. The captain's face was very pale. The armor concealed his wound, but his hand which clutched his side was stained with bright red blood. Act first, worry later. Come on, she said between breaths, draping her arm around her shoulder. We can do this. Together they ran. Shang breathed heavily at her side, but she wouldn't let him slow down. The bottom of the hill was so close. There was a large rock where Yao and the others had taken shelter. If they could just reach it. The wind bellowed, strong gusts pushing them forward. Mulan could feel the avalanche behind him. It had gathered speed like a river released from its dam and gushing with full force and might. The wind whipped at Mulan's back, and heavy clouds of snow hurtled through the air above them. If they didn't move faster, the avalanche would swallow them. She shouted for her horse. Khan! Mulan stole a glimpse over her shoulder just in time to see the mountain fall apart into huge chunks of ice. Shanyu and the rest of the Hun army vanished into the snow, their shouts and cries smothered by the avalanche. The ground roared and shuddered. Snow was everywhere, forcing itself into Mulan's eyes and nose and breath. She clamped her mouth shut, only to have to gasp for air seconds later, the chill filling her lungs. She focused ahead, widening her stride. Keep going. Don't look back. We're halfway there. At her side, Shang was rapidly growing weaker, and they both knew it. Mulan was practically dragging him as she ran. I'm slowing you down, Shang said, wheezing. Leave me behind. Not a chance. She gripped Shang's arm so hard she could barely feel her fingers anymore. She wouldn't give up. She'd run until the end. The avalanche thundered behind them, snapping trees and erasing everything in its path. A familiar neigh startled Mulan. Khan! Her horse powered toward her, his black mane powdered with white snow. Mulan leapt onto his back and reached down to grab Shang, but not fast enough. The avalanche had caught up with them, and it pulled Shang into its icy tide. No, 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 Mulan thought, watching the snow carry him further and further away. She kneed Khan into the flow, and they drifted along with the avalanche's current, Mulan searching desperately for Shang. She couldn't tell which direction was north or south, east or west. There was only out of the snow and in it. The avalanche grew stronger by the second, washing down the hill with brutal force. Snow buried them, covering them in darkness. But each time they fell, Khan kicked and leapt clear out of the snow, and Mulan resumed her search. Shang! She yelled. Shang! A flash of red caught her eye. She spotted the captain up ahead, unconscious and sinking into the snow. Hi-ya! She said, urging Khan toward him. Shang let out a groan as she pulled him up by his shoulders and folded him over Khan's back. Mulan turned Khan back toward the rock. It was close now, but the pulsing waves of snow were too strong. They were impossible to navigate. From this distance, Mulan could see her friends watching her struggle. Yao stood with his bow in his hand. He waved it at them, shouting something Mulan couldn't hear. Ling, the slim and energetic soldier, with Yao and Qianpo, pointed at the rope attached to one of the arrows. Now Mulan understood. They were going to try to pull her to safety. Keeping one arm over Shang's unconscious body, Mulan waved her free hand to show she was ready. Yao raised his bow and shot the arrow. It arched high in the sky, and for a moment Mulan feared that the roiling avalanche might devour it. It landed just beside her, and Mulan grasped it, tying the rope around Khan's body. But the rope slipped through Yao's grasp. Mulan gritted her teeth, but she didn't panic. Every second mattered now, and she had to figure out a way to save them all before they fell off the cliff. Spotting the bow in Khan's pack, she reached for it and aimed the arrow back at her friends. Please catch it, she pleaded, watching the arrow and rope soar back toward Yao, Ling, and Qianpo. She couldn't see them from the rush of the avalanche. Mushu hollered in Mulan's ears as they swooped down with the snow, almost falling off the cliff. But she kept watching the rope, kept waiting. Suddenly the rope grew taut. The snow washed around them instead of with them, and Khan let out a loud neigh as he kicked against the current. Mulan craned her neck, not daring to hope. She could see her friends above, just along the edge of the cliff, and yes, they had caught the rope. She held her breath as the rope stretched and the soldiers heaved together, pulling them to safety behind the rock. Finally, Tianpo, the strongest of her friends, lifted Shang off Mulan's lap. They'd made it. Mulan dismounted, pulled Khan by the reins, and grabbed Mushu. She pressed her back against the rock, squeezing her eyes shut as the trail end of the avalanche washed down the hill. Finally, the ground stopped shaking and the air grew still. Mulan coughed and kicked her way out of the drifts. The others were doing the same. Mushu plucked Cricky, their lucky cricket, out of the snow. Mulan caught her breath. The sweat on her temples and neck had frozen, and she wiped the frost from her face and shook the snow from her uniform. She patted Khan's head, then turned to face her comrades. Yao, Ling, Tianpo, and even Chifu, the Emperor's arrogant advisor. She could hardly believe they all survived. "Thank you, thank you." "Well, we couldn't let you die," Yao said, smiling. Ling raised his fists in agreement. "You're the bravest of us all." Mulan exhaled, and slowly her shoulders relaxed with relief. She and Shang had made it out of the avalanche alive. Shang! At once her good spirits faded. She moved toward the captain, whom Tianpo had managed to keep out of the snow. Shang's face was even paler than before. "He's still unconscious," Tianpo said. Outwardly, his expression was serene as always, but Mulan detected a hint of worry in its voice. "He's wounded," said Mulan. "He needs medical—" Shang stirred, clutching the cape wrapped over his chest. Tianpo brightened. "Look, he's waking up." Shang coughed and wheezed, and Mulan squeezed his shoulder. "Easy, easy." The captain blinked, let out a labored breath. He turned to Mulan, his thick brows furrowing with an unreadable expression. "Ping," said Shang, trying to sit up. Mulan straightened, preparing for a rebuke. "Ping, you are the craziest man I've ever met." He paused. "And for that, I owe you my life. From now on, you have my trust." A slow smile broke out on Mulan's face. "Let's hear it for Ping," her friends cheered. "The king of the mountain." Shang opened his mouth to join in the cheer, then winced and exhaled harshly. Mulan caught at him by the arm. "Shang? I just need to sleep." Shang closed his eyes. Mulan shook his shoulders. "No, stay with us, Shang." But Shang didn't hear her. His hands, which had been clutching his cape, went limp, and he collapsed back into the snow unconscious. "Shang!" Mulan cried. "Wake up!" "Captain?" Yao said, nudging Shang's arm. Shang lay still. The soldiers looked at her hopelessly. A lump hardened in Mulan's throat. Pleading with Shang to wake up wasn't going to do anything. It wasn't going to save him. Mulan knelt beside the captain and touched his cheek to search for a pulse. He was trembling. "He's freezing," said Mulan urgently. "Someone, get him a blanket. We need to start a fire. Keep him warm." Our supplies are buried. There's a blanket on my horse," she interrupted. Ling nodded and rushed toward Khan. When he returned, Tianpo lifted Shang off the snow and carefully set him down on the blanket. Kneeling beside him, Mulan gently drew back Shang's cape. The soldiers gasped, and Mulan stifled a cry. There was a long, deep gash across Shang's abdomen, below his armor. Blood seeped through his uniform and dripped onto the snow, bright as his scarlet cape. The color drained from Mulan's face. She stumbled back, barely noticing Mushu climb on her back and hide behind the green scarf over her armor. "This is my fault," she whispered. "Shanyu was attacking me, and Shang took the blow." Hey, it could have been worse," Mushu replied. "It could have been you, not him. At least you're still alive." Mulan gave her guardian dragon a reproachful look. "You're not helping." "What Mulan ignored him and untied her scarf. "Everyone, give me your scarves. We have to stop Shang's bleeding." One by one, the soldiers passed her their scarves, and Mulan knotted them together into a long bandage. Carefully, she lifted Shang's armor, opened his tunic, and started wrapping his wound. His blood was warm, but his skin was cold. Beads of frost dusted his cheeks and neck. When she was done, she reached to take his pulse again. Her hand shook. Shang's pulse was faint. Too faint. But he was still alive. We need to make camp, she said finally. We need to go to the Imperial City, Chifu corrected. The Emperor's advisor slid out of the corner by the rocks. Frost covered the tips of his thin mustache, making the hairs droop like whiskers on a catfish. He wrapped his robes tightly around him, clearly unhappy to be out in the cold and showing no gratitude that they were still alive. We must inform the Emperor that the Huns have been defeated. We can't travel with Captain Li like this, Mulan argued. He needs to rest. Chifu gazed at the captain and wrinkled his nose. He won't survive a wound like that. The captain is a man of honor. He'd understand. We're not leaving him like this, Mulan said firmly. Your duty to the Emperor comes first, soldier. Chifu frowned at her, his beady eyes unblinking. Or must I document your insubordination? Leave Ping alone, Yao growled. Yeah, Ling chimed in. If not for Ping, we'd all be dead. He saved us all. Chifu harumphed and turned to face his group. All this is Ping's fault. If not for his foolishness, your captain would be still alive. He is still alive, Mulan insisted stubbornly. We're not leaving him behind. Who put you in charge? Chifu retorted. No one, she replied. But Captain Li Shang is our commanding officer. And the Emperor is your ruler. Then we'll take Shang with us. The other soldiers nodded in agreement. Impossible, Chifu snapped. We don't have enough supplies to take our time. The longer we wallow in this blizzard, the sooner we'll die. Besides, he wouldn't survive the journey. He will, said Mulan fiercely. I'll take care of him. Chifu scoffed. Lunatic boy. I will too. So will I. One after another, the soldiers pledged to help their captain. Order, people, order. Chifu crossed his arms, and a crooked smile spread over his mouth. Very well, he announced. Ping will take care of the captain during the journey back, but if he falls behind, you won't wait for him. Getting the Emperor is our top priority. If anyone else tries to help Ping, I'll report his name to the Emperor for insubordination. Chifu paused so his threat could sink in. Understand. Yao opened his mouth to argue, but Mulan was quicker. I understand, she said. Captain Li will be my responsibility. I don't want anyone to be in trouble. We can't let you do this alone, said Jianpo. Ling agreed. Yeah, we all want to help the captain. I'm the only one left with a horse, Mulan replied, glancing about her sadly. The snow had buried Shang's and Chifu's horses, along with many of their fellow soldiers. Only now did she realize how drastically their numbers had dwindled. So many of the men she trained with had been killed, either by the Huns' initial attack or the avalanche. She inhaled. Khan can carry us both. I won't fall too far behind. But a wise decision, Chifu interrupted. I am the Emperor's counsel. That means I now am in charge. I see supplies in the snow that the Huns have dropped. Retrieve as much as you can. Move swiftly. We leave in an hour. No one dared to argue with Chifu's orders, but as the soldiers glumly went about gathering provisions and gear from the snow, Mulan could read their thoughts. The new Shang was gravely wounded. Well, she refused to let Shang die. She swore to herself then and there she would do whatever it took to save him.